I was going to say, you recently listened to a podcast by Joel and Andy, Dudes and Dads
Shout
podcast.
out Dudes and Dads podcast. Go listen to it, y'all. It's a good one.
Yeah, it was. They had a guest speaker and they talked about inner healing, and I feel like that could kind of be tied into what we're talking about right now. And you had some great takeaways from that could be applied. Yeah.
So, shout out to not just Andy and Joel on their podcast, but they had a guy named Tim Miller. And he said something I really appreciated. One of the questions, I guess, they started talking about reads, and books and everything like that. Leaders typically like to read 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 books a year or something like that. Yeah. And Tim Miller gave this great challenge. He said, I only have about 10 to 15 books. Matter of fact, I'll leave this episode in the details of this episode. It's called Inner Healing Prayer by Tim Miller, the Dudes and Dads podcast. I'll leave it in the description. But he was basically saying he only has a few books. And the reason why is he said he rereads them over and over and over again. And here was his point. What good is it for you to get through 30, 40, 50 books in a year and you're only going to live 3 to 4 of the points out? Right? That was a gut check for me too. Because his point was saying, that was actually good. Job well done.
You don't want me to be the audio engineer. Trust me.
Oh man. But all that being said though, his whole point was just saying that we are such consumers of information. And we like to say this on the podcast, like information is not transformation. There's only transformation when there is application. And so his point is, what good is it for you to consume a plethora of different books only to apply 1 or 2 things?
Right.
And so what he's saying is every single person in the world, like I'm sure you have, don't worry about the order, but I'm sure you have like a top 10 or 15 books that just stick out to you that have transformed your life.
Anything by Patrick Lencioni, honestly.
Come on now. Yeah. And everyone kind of has that. Yeah. And so what he's saying is go back to those books and reread them because there's going to be something new that you get. And his point is, as you unpack the thing that has been that transformative for you, guess what? You're more willing then to apply that takeaway. Yeah. And then he goes, by the way, you should probably do that with your Bible. So it's just, right?
I was looking for my slap sound, but my fingers didn't work fast enough.
But I mean, it's just, his point was saying we get stuck on the reading plans, and I'm not knocking those things. Yeah. But what he's saying is, if you're wrestling with something, consider this: all of us have work to do. We all know that, and God is probably trying to reveal something to you, and heck, He probably already has. But what he's saying is, when was the last time you came across a verse or maybe a whole chapter, and you actually just stayed in that verse and chapter until you knew it went into your heart that you did something with it? And so he said, there have been times I've literally read the same chapter every day for a whole month.
That's good.
And his point was, he said the month wasn't the goal. It was, have you overcome this yet? Has this taken root in your heart yet? And if the answer was no, then it was, you don't get to move out of this chapter or out of this verse until this is taken root in your heart and you do something with it. Because here's the thing, we're not called to be Christ doers, or it's going to be Christ believers. We're called to be Christ followers. Yeah. And you can't follow him if you're not doing something. Yeah. And that was his point.